Hey everyone. Thanks for clicking. My name is Joseph, I'm 35, and a few years ago, I stood in the corner at my own brother's wedding while he publicly mocked my entire life's work in front of everyone we knew. But before I tell you about the moment his CEO walked up and changed everything with just 2 words, do me a favor and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can travel. Alright, let's get into it. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of lilies and money. It was held at a place called the Ashworth Manor, a name that sounded like it was pulled from a historical romance novel, and it looked the part. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, casting a glittering, almost oppressively bright light on the sea of guests below. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a statement, a declaration of the Mitchell family's arrival, orchestrated to celebrate its crown prince, my older brother, Leo. I felt like a smudge on a masterpiece painting. My suit was a deep navy, custom-tailored, and probably the most expensive piece of clothing I owned, but it was designed for a boardroom, not a ballroom. It was quiet. It was understated. And in that room, quiet was the same as invisible. It took my mother, Eleanor, less than 5 minutes to spot me lingering near the ornate bar. Her smile was tight, a work of social engineering that didn't quite reach her eyes. She glided towards me, her beaded dress shimmering. "Joseph," she said, her voice a perfectly modulated whisper designed to sound like concern but feel like a blade. She scanned me from head to toe, and I could feel the mental checklist of my deficiencies being ticked off. "You look tired. Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine, Mom. Just taking it all in." "It's a lot, I know," she said, patting my arm. Her touch was light, airy, and carried zero warmth. "But you must try to mingle. It looks so strange, you standing alone in a corner. People will talk." "Let them talk," I said, a little more sharply than I intended. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Don't be difficult. It's Leo's big day. Just try to look like you're having a good time." She didn't wait for a reply, already turning to greet the wife of some senior partner, her dazzling smile instantly restored. I stood there, the familiar cold knot tightening in my stomach. It was a feeling I'd known my whole life, the feeling of being the wrong shape for the puzzle my family was trying to solve. Then, through the crowd, I saw them. Leo and his new bride, Claire. They were a golden couple, laughing and glowing, accepting congratulations like monarchs receiving tribute. I knew it was only a matter of time. Leo slung a heavy, proprietary arm around my shoulder. "There he is, the mysterious tech mogul," he announced to the small circle of his friends they'd brought with them. His tone was drenched in sarcasm. Claire, beautiful and brittle, gave a little laugh. "Leo, be nice. Joseph runs his own little consulting firm. It's very brave." The word brave was delivered as if it were a synonym for doomed. "Poor little brother," Leo said, his voice just loud enough to carry. "Still hiding in corners at parties. Some things never change, huh?" A wave of polite, cruel laughter rippled through his friends. I felt my jaw clench. "It keeps me busy," I said, the same tired phrase I always used. "Busy doesn't pay for a wedding like this, does it?" Leo sneered, sweeping a hand to indicate the sheer, overwhelming opulence of the room. "Still stuck at that tiny firm, while the rest of us are building real careers." I took a slow, deliberate breath. I looked at my brother, the man who believed he'd earned a life that had been gift-wrapped for him. I looked at his bride, whose family name was the single biggest asset on his resume. I knew that in about 20 minutes, his CEO, a man named David Sterling, was scheduled to arrive. And I knew that his arrival would be the catalyst, the spark that would ignite a decade's worth of dry tinder. They thought this was their night. They had no idea it was actually mine. To understand the beautiful, glorious, and catastrophic explosion that was about to happen, you have to understand what it was built on. You have to go back 10 years. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, other times like it was yesterday. I was 25, and I had an idea that kept me awake at night, not with anxiety, but with a buzzing, electric excitement. I had designed a software architecture that could revolutionize supply chain management for large-scale retail. It was predictive, it was efficient, and it was going to make a lot of people a lot of money. I spent 6 months of my life chained to a desk in my cramped, third-floor walk-up apartment, turning that idea into a viable business plan. I lived on ramen noodles and lukewarm coffee. I mapped out everything: market penetration strategy, 5-year growth projections, staffing requirements, the whole 9 yards. I poured my soul into a 40-page document held together by a simple blue binder. The night I presented it to my parents felt like the most important night of my life. We were at their house, sitting around the polished mahogany dining table where so many of Leo's achievements had been celebrated. My father, Richard, a man who saw the world in black and white certainties, sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of judicial skepticism. My mother fidgeted with her napkin, already looking bored. Leo lounged in the doorway, a smug grin playing on his lips, watching the show. I was nervous but passionate. I spoke about algorithms and data analytics, about scalability and first-mover advantage. I laid out the numbers, the logic, and then I got to the ask. I wasn't asking for a gift. I was asking for an investment, a $20,000 loan to build the prototype and secure our first client. When I finished, the silence in the room was deafening. My father cleared his throat. "Joseph," he began, using the patient, weary voice of a man explaining something obvious to a child. "It's an interesting concept. For a school project, perhaps. But the real world doesn't run on these faddish ideas. Dad, this isn't a fad." I pleaded, my voice tight. "The tech sector is booming. This is the future." "The future is unstable," he countered. "The future is a gamble. Your brother, now he's in the real world. Sterling and Company has been a pillar of the financial community for a century. It's tangible. It's secure. That's a career. What you have is a lottery ticket." My mother sighed dramatically. "Honey, we just worry. We've invested so much in your education. For you to throw it away on some computer game seems like such a waste. Why can't you be more like Leo? He's on a real path. A path with a clear salary and a promotion track." The words hung in the air. Why can't you be more like Leo? The question that had defined my entire existence. "So, is that a no?" I asked, the passion in my voice replaced by a hollow ache. "That's a be realistic, son," my father said, standing up from the table. The meeting was over. 2 weeks later, I was scrolling through social media when I saw the pictures. Leo grinning on a first-class flight to Italy. The caption, posted by my mother, read, "So proud of our boy. A well-deserved trip to broaden his horizons before he conquers the world." They hadn't had $20,000 to invest in my future, but they had more than $30,000 to fund his vacation. I closed my laptop. The blue binder with my business plan sat on my desk, looking pathetic. I picked it up and put it in a drawer. It was in that moment, in that crushing, bitter silence, that I understood a fundamental truth about my family. They didn't invest in dreams, they invested in certainties. And I was not, and never would be, a certainty. The fire that lit in me that night wasn't just ambition. It was rage. And I promised myself I would build my dream not with their help, but in spite of their disbelief. A couple of years crawled by. Life settled into a grueling routine. I worked a 9-to-5 job as a junior developer at a generic tech company, a job my parents approved of because it came with a regular paycheck. But my real work started at 8 p.m. and ended at 3 a.m. night after night. I sat in front of my monitor, the glow of the screen illuminating my tiny apartment, and I built my company from scratch. I was a ghost, haunting my own life, sacrificing sleep, friends, and any semblance of a social life for my singular obsession. Every spare dollar I made was funneled into a savings account, an account I guarded like a dragon guarding its hoard. It was slow, painstaking work. Leo, in contrast, was soaring. He was living the life my parents had designed for him. He got engaged to Claire, moved up the ranks at Sterling, and talked endlessly about his career trajectory. Then came the phone call that I should have seen coming. It was my mother, her voice a syrupy blend of concern and calculation. Joseph, honey, how have you been? She started. You sound tired. You're working too hard at that little job of yours. I'm okay, Mom. Just busy. Well, I'm glad I caught you. I have some wonderful news. Leo is on the shortlist for a vice president position. Can you believe it? The youngest VP in Sterling's history. That's great, Mom. It is. But there's a small catch. To really guarantee the promotion, the partners have strongly suggested he get an MBA from a top-tier school. It's more of a requirement than a suggestion, really. I felt a cold prickle of dread. That sounds expensive. It is, she said with a dramatic sigh. Terribly. Your father and I are stretching everything to help, of course. But with the club membership and the property taxes, things are tight. She paused. And then I thought of you, Joseph. You've always been so good with money. So frugal. I imagine you must have a nice little nest egg saved up. The blood drained from my face. My nest egg. The $50,000 I had scraped and saved and sacrificed for. It was my launch capital. My freedom. Mom, that's for my company. That's everything I have. Oh, I know, honey, I know, she cooed, her voice dripping with false sympathy. But think of this as an investment in your brother. In the family. This isn't some risky little tech idea, this is a sure thing. His new salary will be astronomical. He'll pay you back in no time. With interest. You wouldn't want to be the reason he misses out on this incredible opportunity. Would you? We're family. We have to support each other. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. She painted me as the selfish one, the obstacle to the family's collective success. Against every screaming instinct in my body, I caved. It was easier to give her the money than to endure the guilt, the shame, the endless accusations of not being a supportive brother. I met Leo at a coffee shop to give him the check. He was late. He swaggered in, talking loudly on his phone about some stock tip. Hey man, thanks for this, he said, barely looking at me as he took the check and glanced at the number. You're a lifesaver. I'll get this back to you, promise. He folded it and put it in his pocket without another word about it. He then spent the next 20 minutes complaining about the cost of his wedding planner. He never asked me a single question about my life or my work. The $50,000 that represented the sum of my existence to that point was, to him, a minor inconvenience that had just been solved. He got the MBA. He got the VP promotion. He got the six-figure salary. The loan was never mentioned again. It vanished into the ether, another silent sacrifice on the altar of Leo Mitchell. And I learned my second lesson. In my family, my resources were communal property, to be deployed for the greater good of the golden child. My dreams were my own private, selfish burden. In the Mitchell family portrait, there was one figure who always seemed slightly out of place, and he was the only one I ever truly connected with. That was my grandfather, Thomas. He was a carpenter. While my father built a career in sterile operating rooms, my grandfather built things with his hands, solid, tangible things that you could touch and feel. His workshop smelled of cedar and varnish, and it was the one place I felt I could breathe. He was a quiet man. He didn't offer grand pronouncements or unsolicited advice. He observed. While my parents would praise Leo's schmoozing skills, my grandfather would watch me sketching out circuit diagrams on a piece of scrap wood. He didn't get the specifics of what I was doing, but he understood the impulse. He understood the quiet, obsessive focus of a creator. One afternoon, I was trying to explain my software idea to him. I was fumbling, trying to find an analogy he would understand. He stopped me, placing a calloused hand on my shoulder. "Joey," he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "Don't worry about me getting it. I can see it in your eyes. It's the same look I get when I've got a tricky piece of wood, and I can see the chair inside it, just waiting to be let out. You see the shape of the thing. Don't let anyone who can't see it tell you it's not there." His belief in me was a quiet, steady thing, a stark contrast to the loud, conditional approval I got from my parents. Before he passed away, his health already failing, he gave me his old wristwatch. It was a beat-up Timex with a scratched crystal and a faded leather strap, held together in one spot with a bit of electrical tape. It was worthless to anyone else. To me, it was everything. "This old thing has seen me through 30 years of work," he said, his hands trembling slightly as he fastened it to my wrist. "It's not fancy, but it's honest. It does the work. Be like this watch, Joey. Be honest. Do the work. The rest is just noise." His funeral was a somber affair. I remember standing by his gravesite, listening to my father give a eulogy that was kind, but tinged with a subtle pity for my grandfather's simple life. My father had escaped that life, and he wanted the same for his sons. I realized then that his fear for me wasn't just about money. It was about class, about status, about not falling back down the ladder he had worked so hard to climb. After the funeral, my grandmother gave me a worn leather-bound book from his workshop. Tucked inside was a folded, yellowed piece of paper, a note he'd left for me. It was short. "Joey," it read, "a man's worth isn't what he has in the bank. It's what he builds. Go build something great. I believe in you." After I gave Leo the money for his MBA, after I was left with a bank account that was basically zero, that note and that watch were all I had left. I taped the note to the wall above my desk. I wore the watch every single day. They were my true inheritance. Not money, but permission. Permission to believe in myself when no one else did. So I started again, from scratch. I took on every freelance coding gig I could find. I worked until my eyes burned. And slowly, painfully, I rebuilt. This time, there was no business plan for my parents. There were no requests for loans. My dream went underground. It became Apex Innovations. And it was fueled by coffee, spite, and the quiet, unshakable faith of a dead carpenter. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in my family's unique brand of psychological warfare. By this point, Apex Innovations was a silent giant. We had offices in 3 cities, a valuation that was nearing 9 figures, and a reputation in the industry for being relentless and brilliant. My life was a whirlwind of international travel, high-stakes negotiations, and pressure that would crush most people. To my family, I was still Joseph, the quirky tech guy. Their calls were like dispatches from an alternate reality where I was still the one who needed to be managed and pitted. My mother's call about the seating chart was a classic. "Joseph, darling," she chirped, "I've put you at table 19. It'll be lovely. It's with your cousin Mark, you remember him, he's in insurance now, and some of Claire's younger cousins. I thought you'd be more comfortable there, away from all the stuffy business talk." Table 19 was in the corner of the ballroom, practically next to the kitchen doors. What she meant was, "I'm hiding you with the other C-list guests." "Sounds great, Mom," I said, my voice a flat line. "Wonderful. And Joseph," she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "do try to look the part. Leo's boss, the CEO of Sterling, is going to be there. We need to make a good impression." The "we" was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Then came Leo's call, ostensibly to check if I was coming. "Hey, little brother, you ready for the big day?" he asked, the sound of a bustling office behind him. He always called from work. It was part of his performance. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. Good, good. Hey, listen, just a little friendly advice. When you're talking to people, maybe don't get too deep into your computer stuff. Can come off a little desperate. Keep it light, Talk about sports or something." He was coaching me on how not to embarrass him. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. The most insidious call, however, came from my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister and the family's chief intelligence officer. "Joseph, sweetheart, it's your auntie," she sang into the phone. "I am just bursting with excitement for this wedding. Your mother tells me the flowers alone cost more than a car. Leo has done so well for himself. That new promotion. My goodness, I bet his new salary is just jaw-dropping. It must be so hard for you, seeing his success, while you're still trying to get your little venture off the ground. But don't you worry, your time will come." Every word was a perfectly crafted insult wrapped in a sugary coating of concern. She was a pro. I listened to it all. I absorbed the slights, the condescension, the pity. But something inside me had changed. It no longer hurt in the same way. The old sting of rejection had been replaced by a cold, hard sense of purpose. They were all playing their parts in a play where I was cast as the lovable failure. They had no idea I had spent the last several years rewriting the entire script, and that I was about to cast myself in a brand new role. The wedding wasn't just a wedding. It was my opening night. The call that changed the entire strategy came late on a Tuesday night. I was in the Apex boardroom, a cavernous space with a panoramic view of the city, going over the final financials for Project Nightingale, our internal codename for the Sterling and Company acquisition. It was a hostile takeover, meticulously planned for months. We had been quietly buying up shares and lining up shareholder support. The final move was scheduled for the Monday after the wedding. My private line, a number only a handful of people had, started to ring. It was an unlisted number. My curiosity got the better of me. Joseph Mitchell. A gruff, impatient voice answered. Mr. Mitchell. Arthur Thompson here. I froze. Arthur Thompson. Claire's father. A titan of industry, a ruthless negotiator, and a senior member of Sterling's board. My mind immediately went to red alert. He knew. He was calling to threaten me, to try and kill the deal. Mr. Thompson, I said, my voice a mask of calm. This is a surprise. Cut the crap, son, he grunted. I've been on boards longer than you've been alive. I know an executioner's song when I hear it. I've seen your proposal. Project Nightingale. It's bold. It's aggressive. And it's going to work. I waited, saying nothing. Here's the thing, he continued. The old guard at Sterling is going to fight you. They're proud, sentimental fools who would rather go down with the ship than admit it's sinking. I, on the other hand, am a pragmatist. My only loyalty is to the bottom line. I was still trying to figure out his angle. And what does your bottom line tell you, Mr. Thompson? It tells me that my future son-in-law is a charismatic idiot who has been promoted far beyond his level of competence. It tells me that my daughter, bless her heart, is marrying a name, not a talent. It tells me that a significant portion of my family's inheritance is tied up in Sterling stock that is about to become worthless if things continue on their current path. I was floored by his candor. This wasn't a threat. It was a plea. I've seen the reports on Leo, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. The kid's a liability. But the wedding is happening. There's a prenuptial agreement, of course. I'm not a fool. But a messy public divorce in a year when his career implodes is bad for the family brand. A quiet, managed transition under new ownership, however, that's just business. What do you want, Arthur? I asked, dropping the formality. I want you to push this deal through, and I want you to do it fast. The wedding is in 2 weeks. The whole senior team will be there, fat and happy and drunk on cheap champagne. It might be the perfect opportunity for you to introduce yourself. Let them see the shark that's been circling their little yacht. Rattle their cages. A little chaos now could save us a lot of legal fees later. The line went dead. I leaned back in my chair, a slow, predatory grin spreading across my face. The game had not just changed. It had been flipped on its head. I now had an ally on the inside, a man whose motivations were as cold and clear as my own. The wedding was no longer just a family drama. It was now a corporate battlefield, and I had just been given the tactical high ground. The conversation with Arthur Thompson was like a shot of pure adrenaline. Crystallized my resolve. This was no longer just about settling a personal score. It was a strategic move in the biggest business deal of my life. The personal and the professional had become one and the same. The next morning, I called my COO, Sarah Chun, into my office. Sarah was more than my COO. She was my co-conspirator, my reality check, and the one person who knew the whole, ugly story with my family. She'd been with me when Apex was just 2 desks crammed into a rented garage. She'd seen me on the verge of bankruptcy twice. She'd earned her seat at this table. Nightingale is a go for the Monday after the wedding, I said, pacing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The final offer is locked in. The lawyers are ready. Sarah watched me, her expression unreadable. And the wedding? She asked quietly. You're still going? I have to, I said, stopping to look out at the city below. It's part of the play now. Joseph, I've known you for almost a decade, she said, her voice softening. I know what they're like. Are you sure you're ready to walk into that ambush? Forget the CEO stuff for a minute. Are you ready? I turned and walked to my desk. I picked up the small, framed photo of my grandfather and me. For years, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. All I wanted was for them to see me, to see what I've built and say, wow, Joseph, you did it. We were wrong. I craved their validation like a drug. I put the photo down and looked Sarah straight in the eye. But I'm done with that. I'm not going there seeking their approval. I'm not going there to ask for their respect. I paused, letting the words settle. I'm going there to take it. I straightened my tie. My hand went to the old, beat-up watch on my wrist. Felt like an anchor in a storm. I'm going to walk into that party. I'm going to let them say their lines. I'm going to let them cast their pitying glances. And then I'm going to burn their whole stage to the ground. They're about to find out they've been telling the wrong story about the wrong son. A slow, fierce smile spread across Sarah's face. Okay then, she said. In that case, I've taken the liberty of clearing your schedule for all of Tuesday. I have a feeling you're going to want the day off to deal with the fallout. My decision was no longer a decision. It was an inevitability. A freight train that had left the station years ago, finally thundering towards its destination. The wedding. The morning of the wedding was strangely serene. The city was quiet, draped in the soft, gray light of dawn. While I knew my family's house was a hive of controlled chaos. Hairstylists, makeup artists, frantic phone calls. My apartment was an oasis of calm. My preparation was a ritual. I didn't blast music to pump myself up. I didn't pace nervously. I moved with a methodical, almost meditative precision. I laid out my suit the night before. It wasn't a flashy tuxedo. It was a bespoke charcoal suit, cut from a heavy English wool. It was a suit designed to convey authority, not celebrate it. It was my uniform. As I showered, I mentally rehearsed the key data points from the Sterling acquisition file. Their revenue decline over the last 3 fiscal years. Their bloated executive salary structure. The abysmal performance of the division Leo managed. I wasn't just preparing for a family confrontation. I was preparing for a shareholder meeting. Before I got dressed, I sat at my desk and opened a locked file on my computer. It was a single scan document. The loan agreement I had foolishly never made my mother sign, but which I had documented in an email to her. An email she had replied to with a simple, "Thank you, honey, you're a lifesaver." It wasn't legally binding, perhaps, but it was proof. A digital ghost of a promise broken. I saved a copy to my phone. As I fastened my grandfather's watch to my wrist, the worn leather felt cool against my skin. It was a tangible link to the one man who had always believed in me. This was for him, too, to prove that his faith was not misplaced. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. The board has been officially notified of a pending transformative offer to be finalized Monday. The rumor mill is on fire. Your stage is set. I texted back, "Let's give them a show." My final touch was a tie clip, a simple bar of brushed platinum. On the back, almost too small to read, were engraved the coordinates of my grandfather's old workshop. A secret message to myself. A reminder of where I came from and what I was fighting for. I looked at my reflection. I saw a man who had been forged in the fire of his family's indifference. And he was ready to bring the heat. I arrived at the manor as the cocktail hour was in full swing. I deliberately bypassed the main entrance where my parents were greeting guests and slipped in through a side garden entrance. I wanted to observe before I was observed. The garden was teeming with the elite of the city's financial sector. It was like a convention for people who used summer as a verb. I got a club soda from a passing waiter and found a spot under a large oak tree. I recognized more faces than I expected. Not as Joseph Mitchell, Leo's brother, but as J.P. Mitchell, the reclusive founder of Apex Innovations. I saw heads turn. I saw whispered conversations and pointed fingers from people I knew only from industry reports. They were confused, wondering what the Apex ghost was doing at a Sterling wedding. My cousin Mark, bless his oblivious heart, was the first family member to find me. Joseph, there you are. Mom said you were hiding somewhere. You believe this setup? Leo's a freaking king. It's quite a party, I said, my eyes scanning the crowd. So, how's the computer thing? He asked, his attention already drifting. It's keeping me busy, I said, a faint smile on my lips. Just had to push a board meeting in Zurich to make it here today. The international travel is a killer. Mark's brain seemed to short-circuit for a second. Zurich? Like Switzerland? That's the one, I said, taking a sip of my soda. He didn't know what to do with that piece of information. It didn't fit. He mumbled something about needing to find the bar and scurried away. A few minutes later, Uncle Robert found me. He was a loud, backslapping man who believed volume was a substitute for wit. Joseph, my boy, he boomed, hitting my shoulder a little too hard, still trying to make a go of it in that tech bubble. I tell you, it's all smoke and mirrors. You should get Leo to find you a real job at Sterling. Something with a pension. I turned to face him, my expression unreadable. That's an interesting thought, Uncle Robert, I said, my voice even. In fact, I've been spending a lot of time lately thinking about the future of Sterling. A lot of time. I held his gaze for a moment too long, then gave him a polite nod and walked away, leaving him looking puzzled. I wasn't making announcements. I was planting landmines. Small, conversational explosives that would detonate later, in the memories of the people who heard them. I was laying the groundwork, ensuring that when the main charge went off, the shockwave would be amplified by a dozen small echoes of, "Wait, he did say something about that earlier." The show was about to begin. The grand ballroom was a symphony of clinking glasses and self-congratulatory chatter. I was at table 19, a remote outpost in the far corner, exactly as my mother had planned. The centerpiece was smaller here. The wine was poured less frequently. It was perfect. It gave me a clear view of the entire room, a strategic vantage point. Just as the waiters were clearing the salad plates, a subtle shift occurred in the room's energy. A new figure had entered, and he was being escorted by my beaming father. It was David Sterling. He was older than I expected, with tired eyes and the weary posture of a man captaining a ship he knew was taking on water. He was flanked by Arthur Thompson, who gave me a nearly imperceptible nod from across the room. Leo, at the head table, saw his boss and immediately sprang into action. This was his moment. He grabbed Claire's hand and practically dragged her to meet them, his smile so wide it looked painful. He was the conquering hero presenting his prize. He guided Mr. Sterling through the room like a politician working the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. My parents trailed in his wake, soaking in the reflected glory. And then, I saw the procession turn and head directly for my table. It was a deliberate, calculated path. Leo's smirk was positively predatory. He was bringing the mountain to Muhammad, to show Muhammad just how insignificant he was. They stopped right in front of me. My tablemates fell silent, awestruck. "Mr. Sterling," Leo announced, his voice echoing with theatrical importance. "A real pleasure to have you. I'd like you to meet the rest of my family. This is my younger brother, Joseph." He gestured to me with a dismissive flick of his hand. "He's a bit of an entrepreneur. Has his own little consulting shop." David Sterling, who had been wearing a polite, strained smile, turned his gaze to me. His eyes, initially glazed over with social obligation, slowly came into focus. Then they widened. The polite smile vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. He physically recoiled, pulling his arm from Leo's grasp as if he'd been burned. The shift in his demeanor was so abrupt and so total that it created a vacuum of silence around our table. Leo's triumphant expression faltered, melting into a mask of utter confusion. Sterling took a hesitant step forward. He wasn't looking at a subordinate's little brother. He was looking at a man who held his entire future in his hands. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, his voice a low, respectful murmur that was somehow more powerful than Leo's boom. He extended his hand, not casually, but formally. "I I am so sorry. I had no idea you would be in attendance. I wasn't informed. The silence spread. Conversations at the neighboring tables sputtered and died. My father and mother, who had been basking in the glow, now looked on with expressions of complete bewilderment. I stood slowly, the scrape of my chair on the floor sounding unnaturally loud. I took his offered hand. The handshake was firm, but his palm was clammy. "David," I said, my voice calm and clear, using his first name with an easy familiarity that was a statement in itself. "No need to apologize. It's a family event. I'm here in a personal capacity." I gave a slight, almost imperceptible smile. For now, Leo's head was swiveling back and forth between the two of us, like a spectator at a tennis match he didn't understand. Wait, what's going on?" he stammered, his voice cracking. "You too? You know each other?" I finally turned my full attention to my brother. The moment I had replayed in my mind 1,000 times, in 1,000 different ways, was here, and it was more perfect than I could have ever imagined. I let him hang there in his confusion for 1, 2, 3 long seconds. Then I smiled, and I began to dismantle his world, piece by piece. "Oh, we know each other, Leo," I said, my voice quiet but carrying an edge of cold steel that cut through the silence. "We've been in extensive negotiations for the past 6 months. Haven't we, David?" David Sterling just nodded stiffly, his face pale. He looked like a man who had just realized his executioner was a guest at his dinner party. Leo forced a high, nervous laugh. "Negotiations? What are you talking about? Joseph, my man, you run a 2-man shop out of your apartment. What could you possibly be negotiating with the CEO of Sterling and Company?" "That's where you're wrong," I said, my voice never rising, yet commanding the attention of everyone within earshot. "You see, you were so busy looking down on my tiny firm that you never bothered to actually look at it. You never once asked what it was called." I paused, letting the indictment hang in the air. "It's called Apex Innovations, and it's not a consulting shop. It's a global logistics and technology firm. And as for our negotiations," I looked back at Mr. Sterling. "He's talking about Project Nightingale." At the mention of the code name, a flicker of genuine fear crossed Sterling's face. Arthur Thompson, standing behind him, allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Project Nightingale," I continued, turning my full attention back to my stunned family, "is the operational name for our 100% stock acquisition of a legacy financial firm that has failed to adapt to the modern market. A firm by the name of Sterling and Company." A collective gasp went through the nearby tables. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face, which had been a mask of pride moments before, was now a canvas of disbelief and horror. Leo just stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, the words refusing to process. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not possible." "Not only is it possible, Leo, it's a done deal," I said, pressing my advantage. "The board is meeting on Monday morning as a formality to approve the final offer. An offer which, I might add, is the only thing standing between Sterling and Company and Chapter 11 bankruptcy." And then came the final, beautiful, devastating blow. I gave him a look of pity, the same look he had given me for my entire life. "So, to answer your question, yes, we know each other. And come Monday, our professional relationship will be much, much simpler. You'll be the employee, and I will be the man who signs your paychecks. Assuming, of course, that your position still exists after the restructuring." Crash. The sound was explosive. Every head turned. Claire, the beautiful bride, stood frozen, her face a mask of horror. A puddle of champagne and shattered glass was spreading at her feet. She had dropped her glass, a perfect, violent punctuation to the end of her perfect golden world. My mother found her voice first, a shrill, panicked cry. "Joseph, this is a lie. It has to be a joke. You can't possibly." "It's no joke, Mom," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I pulled out my phone, opened the email from her, and held it up. The words, "Thank you, honey. You're a lifesaver," glowed on the screen. Just like the $50,000 loan I gave Leo for his MBA wasn't a joke. The one that was supposed to secure his brilliant future and his massive new salary. The one that was never, ever paid back. The public airing of that secret, that ugly little debt, was the final humiliation. The room wasn't just silent now. It was a vacuum. And in the center of it, my family was finally, truly, seeing me for the very first time. This was the moment. The moment the scales didn't just tip, they shattered. It was the moment I finally took back control of my own story. Thank you for staying with me to this point. You're amazing. If you would, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you made it this far with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The air in the ballroom was thick with unspoken questions. The wedding guests were trying to pretend they weren't listening, but their eyes were all fixed on our family drama. The band had stopped playing. The only sound was the low hum of gossip. "Not here," I said, my voice low and firm. I gestured with my head toward a heavy oak door near the back of the room, marked private. Now. I didn't wait for them to agree. I turned and walked, confident they would follow. The gravitational pull of a crisis is a powerful thing. I heard the scuff of their shoes on the marble floor behind me. My father's angry strides, my mother's hesitant clicks, Leo's stumbling, defeated shuffle. Claire, to her credit, followed them, her face streaked with tears but her back straight. I closed the door to the anteroom behind us, and the sudden silence was more deafening than the noise. The room was opulent and claustrophobic, filled with velvet chairs and dark oil paintings of dead aristocrats. Felt like a courtroom. Leo, predictably, was the first to break. His fear had curdled into a desperate, impotent rage. "You son of a bitch!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "You planned this. You came here to my wedding to ruin my life." I didn't even flinch. I just looked at him, my expression unreadable. "Your life?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Let's be clear, Leo. Your life, as you know it, was a syndicated loan. Your parents were the primary investors, and I was the minority shareholder they cashed out without telling me. I didn't ruin your life. I just called in the debt." My mother rushed forward, her hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "Joseph, please stop this. We can fix it. Whatever you think we did, we can make it right. We're a family." "A family?" I shot back, the word tasting like poison. "Is that what this is? A family is a support system, Mom, not a pyramid scheme with one beneficiary at the top. You didn't just ignore my dreams. You actively siphoned resources from them to fund his. You didn't just fail to support me. You used me." My father, who had been silent until now, his face a thunderous mask of fury, finally stepped forward. He tried to reclaim his power, to use the voice that had commanded operating rooms and boardrooms for decades. "That is enough," he snarled. "I don't know what kind of fantasy you're living in, but you will stop this nonsense right now. I will not have you embarrass this family. I will call our lawyer. We will fight this hostile takeover." I almost laughed. It was pitiful. "Your lawyer," I said, shaking my head slowly. "Dad, you are so far out of your depth you can't even see the surface. While you've been worrying about which table to seat me at, I've spent the last 6 months with a team of the most ruthless corporate lawyers in the country. We have the shares. We have the shareholder support. We have the backing of key board members." I glanced at Claire. "Including your new father-in-law, who, as it turns out, is deeply concerned about his daughter's financial future being tied to an incompetent executive. The fight is already over. You just didn't hear the bell." The mention of her father was a direct hit on Claire. She visibly flinched, her last bastion of support crumbling. My father?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "He knew about this?" "He did more than know about it, Claire," I said, my voice softening slightly. I felt a flicker of pity for her. She was a casualty in a war she didn't even know was being fought. "He encouraged it. He called me personally. He sees Leo for what he is, a bad investment. This was never just about me and my brother. It was about business. And in the world of business, sentiment is a liability. Leo looked as if I had physically struck him. He sank into one of the velvet chairs, all the fight gone out of him, replaced by a hollow, vacant stare. He looked broken. I turned my attention back to my parents. For 10 years, I have lived in the shadow of a myth you created. The myth of the golden son and the struggling one. You measured my worth in comparison to him, and you always found me lacking. You never once stopped to think that maybe we were running different races entirely. I walked to the door. I had said everything I needed to say. The power dynamic in the room had been irrevocably altered. I didn't do this to hurt you, I said, my hand on the doorknob. It was the truest thing I had said all night. I did this to be seen by you, to finally force you to look at me, at who I really am, without the filter of your disappointment and your fear. I opened the door and looked back at them one last time. My father, speechless. My mother, openly weeping. My brother, a ghost in a tuxedo. And his bride, a stranger among them. The company restructuring will begin in 2 weeks, I said, my voice all business now. My office will be in touch regarding the future of your positions. Until then, I suggest you try and enjoy the rest of the wedding. I walked out of the room, leaving them in the wreckage. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I just felt free. The weight of a lifetime of expectations, a weight I hadn't even fully realized I was carrying, had finally been lifted. I was my own man, not their son, not their brother, just me. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The 3 months following the wedding were a brutal, exhilarating blur. The acquisition of Sterling and Company was front-page news in the financial papers. They called it a shocking coup, a brilliant hostile takeover by the industry's most enigmatic player. The narrative was that a tech upstart had devoured a Wall Street dinosaur. No one knew the real story, the family drama that had been the secret engine of the whole affair. My first order of business was a complete overhaul of the executive team. I brought in my people from Apex, sharp, hungry, and loyal. We were surgeons cutting away the rot that had been slowly killing the company for years. Bloated departments were streamlined. Useless vanity projects were shuttered. Redundant positions were eliminated. I didn't fire Leo. I could have. No one would have blinked. It would have been justified as a simple business decision. But that felt too easy. It would have allowed him to be a martyr. He spent weeks in a state of suspended animation, still officially a VP but with no duties, no staff, and no access. He was a ghost haunting the hallways of the company he once thought he would one day run. I let him wait. I let him wonder. Finally, I summoned him to my office. It was the former CEO's office, a cavernous space I had stripped of its dark wood and leather and replaced with glass and steel. It was my territory now. He walked in looking 10 years older. He had lost weight. The arrogance that had been his defining characteristic was gone, replaced by a deep, weary uncertainty. "Joseph," he began, his voice raspy. I'm sorry. Save it," I said, not unkindly. "Apologies are for family. In this room, we're colleagues. And as your colleague, I have to be honest. Your performance record is abysmal. By any normal metric, you should have been fired 2 years ago." I saw him flinch, but he said nothing. He just stood there and took it. "However," I continued, "I'm a believer in data, and the data I have on you is incomplete. It shows how you perform when everything is handed to you. It doesn't show how you perform when you have to earn it." I pushed a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was an internal job posting. "There's a position open on the ground floor, a junior analyst on the Midwest logistics team. This data entry, report generation, grunt work. The salary is less than your monthly mortgage payment. You'll be working for a woman named Maria who is 28 years old and has no patience for excuses. There will be no shortcuts, no special treatment. Your last name will mean nothing." He stared at the paper. It was the most profound insult I could have possibly delivered, and the only real opportunity he had ever been given. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice a whisper. Because for my entire life, I've had to prove my worth, I said, leaning forward. Now it's your turn. You can take this and you can learn the business from the bottom up the way you should have 10 years ago. Or you can walk out that door with a severance package and never look back. The choice, for the very first time, is completely yours. He stood there for what felt like an eternity. I could see the war playing out behind his eyes. The pride warring with the terror, the humiliation warring with the faintest glimmer of a lifeline. Finally, with a trembling hand, he picked up the piece of paper. Okay, he said, his voice barely audible. Okay, I'll do it. He walked out of my office, not as a fallen prince, but as something new, something uncertain. It was the beginning of his real story, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't anger or resentment. It was a sliver of hope. My parents retreated into a shell of wounded silence. For weeks, the only communication was a series of terse, angry emails from my father's lawyer, which my legal team swatted away like flies. But as the reality of the New World Order set in, the anger gave way to something else. Desperation. They started calling, leaving long, rambling voicemails filled with accusations. Then pleas, then tears. I didn't answer. I didn't listen to them. I needed the silence. I needed to let the new boundaries solidify. One afternoon, Emma, my executive assistant, buzzed my intercom. Her voice was hesitant. Mr. Mitchell, your parents are in the lobby. They don't have an appointment, but they're insistent. I knew this moment would come. It's all right, Emma. Send them up. They walked into my office and stopped just inside the door, looking small and out of place against the backdrop of glass and sweeping city views. This was my kingdom, and they were supplicants. The power dynamic had been permanently, irrevocably rewired. My father looked humbled. The arrogant certainty was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. My mother just looked lost. Joseph, my father began, his voice rough with emotion. We need to talk. I gestured to the two chairs in front of my desk. I remained in my own chair, behind the desk. The symbolism was intentional. I'm listening. He sat down heavily, his hands clasped between his knees. We have been fools, he said, the words seeming to cost him a great deal. Arrogant, blind fools. My mother started to cry softly. We never meant to hurt you, honey, she sobbed. We love you. We didn't understand. I know you love me, I said, and it was true. Their love had never been the question. The question was whether they respected me. What I don't understand is why. Why was it so easy for you to believe in him, and so impossible for you to believe in me? My father looked up, and his eyes were filled with a surprising, raw vulnerability. Because I was a coward, he said, his voice cracking. I grew up poor, Joseph. My father, your grandfather, was the best man I ever knew, but he struggled his whole life. Every day was a battle. I clawed my way into a different life, a life of security, of respectability. And I was terrified, utterly terrified, of my children falling back down. When I looked at Leo, he continued, I saw my own path, the safe path, the corporate ladder. It made sense to me. But when I looked at you, with your ideas about software and things I couldn't understand, you looked like your grandfather. You looked like a dreamer, and it terrified me. I thought I was protecting you from a life of struggle. I pushed you down because I was trying to keep you from falling. My mother looked at me, her face a mess of tears and regret. We were so afraid of you failing, she whispered, that we never gave you a chance to succeed. We were trying to manage our own fears, and we used your future and your brothers as the chess pieces. It was a terrible, unforgivable mistake. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the years of pain and neglect. But it was the truth. A truth more complex and more human than I had ever allowed myself to imagine. They hadn't been monsters. They had just been flawed, frightened people, passing down their own insecurities like a family heirloom. I took a deep breath, the first truly deep breath I'd taken in their presence in years. Thank you, I said, my voice quiet. Thank you for telling me that. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. A chance to clear away the rubble and see if anything was worth rebuilding. The years that followed were years of quiet reconstruction, both in business and in my family. The new Sterling Apex Corporation became a powerhouse, a perfect fusion of old-world stability and new-world innovation. Leo stayed. He worked his way up from the bottom, slowly, painstakingly. He was quiet, diligent, and humble. He learned the names of the people on the loading docks. He understood the flow of inventory in a way he never had from a corner office. About a year ago, he was promoted to regional logistics manager. He earned it. He actually truly earned it. We don't have the easy camaraderie that some brothers do. There's too much scar tissue for that. But there's a new, quiet respect between us. We meet for coffee sometimes. We talk about the business, the challenges, the opportunities. We are, in our own fractured way, finally on the same team. My parents and I have found a new, fragile equilibrium. We have dinner once a month. The conversations are often stilted, cautious. They ask about my work, and they listen with a genuine desire to understand. They are trying to learn the language of a son they are only just getting to know. My father and I have even started talking about his father, my grandfather. He tells me stories I've never heard, about his kindness, his integrity, his quiet strength. In talking about the father he loved, he is, I think, trying to learn how to be a better one himself. Sometimes, late at night, when the office is quiet and the city is just a carpet of lights below, I take my grandfather's watch out of my desk drawer. The leather is frayed. The crystal is hopelessly scratched. By all objective measures, it is worthless. But it's the most valuable thing I own. I used to think my great victory was that day at the wedding, the moment I laid my family's hypocrisy bare for all to see. But I was wrong. That wasn't the victory. That was just the breaking of the fever. The real victory came in the quiet moments that followed. In Leo choosing to stay, in my father's confession, in the slow, difficult work of rebuilding. My grandfather's note is framed on my office wall now. A man's worth isn't what he has in the bank. It's what he builds. For a long time, I thought he meant building a company, an empire of glass and steel. But I've come to realize he meant something more. He meant building a life of integrity, building relationships based on truth, even when it's painful, building a future that is honestly and truly your own. Success, I've learned, isn't a destination you arrive at. It's not a final act of revenge or a public moment of vindication. It's a process. It's the quiet, daily act of choosing to believe in yourself, especially when it's hard. And that's a foundation that no one can ever shake. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt completely underestimated? I'd be honored if you shared your own story in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.